Well, hello, Dan here, 22nd of April 2024, and welcome to my garden here in Essex, southeast UK. Beautiful weather today, and I thought I would make a video and show you some crops that you could sow at this time of year, and many of them you'll be able to see here I've actually sown already, but if you haven't, don't worry, because many of them you can actually plant now. So before we get into what I've got here and a few other things, please let me know in the comment section below what you're growing. I'm very interested to hear what you're growing, what has done well, what has maybe not done so well, what has been a complete disaster. Maybe put where you live, what country you're in, what USDA zone you're in, your whereabouts in general, because many people, including myself, will be very interested in what you're growing, so we can all see just what's happening out there. So we'll start here, and the first crop we shall start with is some beetroot. So I've actually got two varieties of beetroot that I have planted here, and this one here is a variety called Rote Kugel 2, which is very interesting, and I got these seeds from, I think it was Lidl, it could be Aldi, but they've done very well indeed. So I've actually modular sown them in this cell tray here, and my planting date for those was the 14th of March. So beetroot you could generally plant up until around July time, probably a bit later depending on where you are, August, September. I have planted beetroot as late as September. You might not get very big roots, but you can always eat the tops of beetroot. Very nutritious to eat. But yeah, 14th of March, and I could plant these out now if I wanted. I'm probably going to give them a week or so, a little bit longer, and then I will be planting them out in the garden here. So before we get really into this video, please feel free to have a look in the description box below, and you'll see many videos in there discussing many of the crops we're going to be talking about today. And they're in quite good detail, I like to think, and hopefully they'll help you if you've got the time to look at them with growing many of the crops I've got, and hopefully get you some lovely yields. So they'll be there if you want to find them. And with regards to what I'm growing here, I used multi-purpose compost. One brand I used was Levington multi-purpose compost, nothing else added to it. And I also used, maybe not for some of this here, but at the end of the growing season last year, I bought some multi-purpose compost, a job lot from B&Q, and that was very good. Quite often at the end of the growing season you can get quite cheap compost, you know, and because the shops want to clear it. Only problem is you can get fungus gnats in there, you know, little flies that reside in there over winter, and then proceed to grow your seedlings the following year. So ideally it's not good really to use old compost for seedlings. I didn't use any of that in these, but I did in some, which we'll get to in a moment. And I also used a grow bag, which I purchased from Lidl's, if I remember correctly, for some seed germination as well. So let's just have a little look. Now, cabbage. For this I used some of the Levington, and the planting date for these was the 6th of February, and it's variety Earliest of All, a really beautiful variety of cabbage. I really love this, makes great coleslaw. You've got to protect it from slugs very much at this stage, and also pigeons, etc. But check out that video in the description box below if you want to learn about the growing of cabbage. But yeah, cabbage, so really lovely. Now, cabbage, this variety, and indeed another variety such as Greyhound, you could also plant that now as well. You certainly have not missed the boat. You could plant that now. And what else have we got here? Tomatoes. So I've got one variety here called Big Zack, which this variety actually got the world record for biggest tomato. Isn't that wonderful? So planting date for these, 29th of February. These ones here, 16th of February. And these ones here, once again, 29th of February. So they are in need of a bit of TLC, a bit of repotting. I'll get round to that in due course. So with regards to where I germinated many of these things, the beetroot here and the cabbage I actually germinated in the polytunnel. I didn't take them inside, I just used the weather and the microclimate of the polytunnel, which I'll show you in a moment. The tomatoes, I actually germinated them inside on a south-facing windowsill, and then I brought them out probably about 3 weeks or so later. I don't expose these to too low temperatures. Beetroot and this cabbage is fully frost hardy around here, USDA zone 8B, but not too great for the tomatoes. We went down to about 1 degree C the other night. What's that, about 34 Fahrenheit, something like that? So I brought them in, and I used the Levington multi-purpose compost for those. Now, this is very interesting. Here I have a giant marrow, which I purchased the seeds from Foster's Seeds. Very nice. Planted on the 6th of February. So there you go, a lovely crop there. Well, not crop, but a lovely plant, strong, sturdy plant looking there. Germinated that inside. I'll show you how I germinated that, because marrows, squash, pumpkins, etc., courgettes, they like a nice warm temperature, about 25 degrees C to germinate. Very difficult to achieve that outside without any form of heating here in the UK, you know, on the 6th of February, that time of year. But if you can, you want to try to do that. Here I have a giant pumpkin, once again, 6th of February, Pacific Giant. There you go, grown those before. Once again, you know, there's some quite a humorous pumpkin video. You'll find that in the description box below. I germinated them in the Levington multi-purpose compost. Now here, very interesting, melons. So many of you are aware I'm very fond of growing melons. So didn't have the best germination with these. Some of that could be to do with the temperature, some of that could be to do with the seeds were old, or maybe just a little bit of bad luck. But rich sweetness here, 1, 2, 3. I've got 3 there, and here, what variety is this? Kazakh melon. I've got 1 that germinated. They all went in on the 6th of February. Once again, they like a nice warm temperature to germinate. You know, if you're that early in the year and you just stick one outside in a polytunnel or greenhouse in a pot, highly unlikely to germinate. So I germinated them inside on a south-facing windowsill, and then I brought them out. Now, quite a little bit of a detail there. When they were inside, even with that little microclimate, only about 1 or 2 germinated. And I kind of not gave up, but I thought, well, let's not worry too much about those. Then what I did was I brought them out into the polytunnel, and the temperature got warmer, and then I noticed the rest of them had germinated. So the ones you see, 2 or 3 more had germinated. So sometimes you know, funny things happen, and it can be good not to give up too much. And the compost underneath, I've topped it up a little bit with the Levington, but underneath was the grow bag compost from the Lidl's grow bag. So would I recommend planting melons now? Well, yes and no. So with regards to many of the squash family, they do like warm temperatures. So for example, marrows, courgettes, etc., you could definitely plant those now. They don't generally need as long a growing season as something such as melons. So yes, squash, cucumbers, pumpkins, yeah, you can plant those now, no problem. You know, you can get away with planting those up to sort of early June time, so there we are. Now with regards to the melons, they tend to be a bit slower growing. They really do like warmth. They like a longer growing season. So if you're going to plant melons now, I recommend that you don't get too invested in your level of success. Go for it, you know, if you really want to have a go at it, but make sure you select one that needs a short season. So if you're going for watermelons, you might want to do something such as Sugar Baby. That could be good. And this rich sweetness, I think that needs a short growing season as well. But yeah, certainly fill your boots, and if these hadn't germinated, I definitely would have planted some more now. So that's what we've got here. So over here, I've actually got some potatoes growing. So these are variety Maris Piper, which I probably planted around the 14th, 15th of February, something like that. I've got them all earthed up. So actually in here, they're in this 30 litre tub, and you can see they're doing pretty well already. Look, they've sprung out the top there, no problem at all. And they're actually in my own homemade compost, which I will show you in a moment. So this was, if I haven't mentioned it already, a shop bought potato, quite a large one, and I literally just put it in there, earthed it up 2 or 3 times, and there we are. So I'm expecting quite a nice crop from there, nice early potatoes. So yes, much earlier than what is generally practiced with regards to the planting of potatoes, quite often Easter weekend, etc. You can plant your potatoes now, first, second, early's main crop, determinate, indeterminate, plant them now, no problem at all. I like to grow my potatoes early simply because, you know, being brought up here in the UK, potatoes are a big part of our diet, and I like to have my potatoes ready early, and of course give them as long as possible in order for them to make a good size. So that was my first planting of potatoes. So I've got some early potatoes here, otherwise known as determinate potatoes. I've got Rocket and Pentland Javelin, which I planted these all on the 29th of February. They're in my own homemade compost here, and they've actually started to come through. I hope you could just see this one there, look, see that there? So they're coming through. Now, with regards to early potatoes, you generally don't need to earth them up because they only grow on one layer, but because I didn't have too much compost ready at the time, I actually have chosen to earth these up as the compost became ready. But you really don't need to earth them up, but as I've explained, I did. You won't lose for doing it, but if you want to get it done all in one go, you can just do that. Once again, 29th of February for planting date. At the back here I have Condor Potatoes, and these are actually from home saved seed potatoes. I overwintered them in a cool, dark place. There we are. And then I've actually grown them this year. So this one here is in need of earthing up. So that's very good indeed. It was a good idea actually that I managed to overwinter some, because last year it was quite hard to get hold of Condor seed potatoes. I think I did see someone selling them this year, but there we are. I kept some, and I'll keep some at the end of this year. And at the front here I have Maris Piper, a lovely potato, makes great chips, etc, etc, and yeah, starting to grow through. So once again I need to earth them up when the time comes. So once again, yeah, you can see my potatoes here. I got them in quite early, but no problem. You can plant them now. You won't lose for planting them now. Generally, you might not get your overall crop as quick as I may get mine, but does that really matter? As long as we get our lovely crops, we don't really worry too much about things like that. A few years ago, when I grew some rather large Condor potatoes, I actually did plant them very early indeed. So you'll find that video in the description box below if you want to see the potential benefits of early planting potatoes. Obviously, if I was getting hard frosts, I would make sure that the tops of my potatoes were not getting burnt, damaged by the frost, etc, because that could potentially put the tubers back. But just keep an eye out and keep a little bit of compost ready, or indeed if you're growing them in the ground early on, keep a little bit of spare soil ready so you can just cover them up should you need to protect them. So we go over here now. I actually need to do a little bit of weeding here, but that's fine, that will all get done. So here I've got some lovely plantings. I've got some garlic over there, which was variety Morado, and I purchased them from, I think it was either Aldi or Lidl. They were a grocery store garlic bulb, and I split it up and planted it over there. They're looking very good actually indeed. I'll give you a close-up of those in a moment. Over here, this is in all its beautiful glory, and this is a lovely apple tree here, makes huge apples like that, and I'm going to be baking some this year. I'm expecting a good year for fruit, by the way. I'm looking at my fruit trees, which we'll cover in a subsequent video, but yeah, loads of blossom this year, beautiful. Anyway, back to the particular subject of this video, and here I have broad beans, variety Aquadulture Claudia. So let's look at those. Lovely variety of broad bean. These can get quite big. They're generally the variety that's recommended for overwintering. So you can actually plant these around sort of late September, October, November time, then overwinter them in the garden or in a pot in a greenhouse or polytunnel or whatever. In that case of these, I didn't overwinter them actually. I really should have, but everyone knows that, you know, my regular viewers know I had a little bit of a health challenge over the winter and stuff, so stuff that I would have liked to have got done didn't, but that's part of the game, as they say. But these went in on the 11th of February in pots. So I actually did germinate them inside, and then when they were about that sort of size, I brought them out to the polytunnel. And for that, I did actually use that old B&Q compost I told you about earlier. I found that the fungus gnats generally don't go for these too much, so there we are. But best practice would still be to use new compost if possible. And then I planted them out here probably mid-March time, something like that. They're doing very well indeed. But my preferred method for growing broad beans is actually in containers, and I made a video on that as well, and guess where you'll find it, description box below. But I'll show you my one over here. So here we go, and hope you can see, there you go, hope you can see that all right. So it's actually more advanced than the ones in the ground, which I would expect, because when you grow things in containers, the ground in them tends to warm up quicker than if it's, sorry, the growing medium within them tends to warm up quicker than if you were growing them in the ground. So there we are, doing very well indeed. Of course, an issue of growing anything in containers, generally harder to keep the pots watered than it is to keep things in the ground watered. But if you've got the time and the energy and you want a great broad bean crop, grow them in containers, because I think it rocks. So down here I've got my garlic here, Murano or Morado. The name of the variety escapes me. I'll put it on the screen. But there we are. So these ones I probably planted out about 6 weeks ago. These ones here a bit later, probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, something like that. And down here I have onions underneath the mesh here. So I actually bought sets. Ideally I'd have grown them from seed. Didn't happen. There we are. I'll do that next year. 2 varieties. I got Carmen, and here I've got Sturon, and these I planted here probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, something like that. I've got them under the mesh because birds absolutely love to upend them. Generally the birds, they won't upend them when they're established, but when they're small, they love to just pop them out. So the mesh here gives them a nice bit of protection. I've got the old logs here holding that down. So yeah, gonna have a lovely crop of onions, all being well this year. Would I plant onions or garlic now? So regarding the garlic, ideal for me to plant garlic is around November time and then over winter. Didn't do it, didn't get round to it, making the best of what I've got, so I planted them when I did. You know, does it really matter if you don't get ideal perfect crops? You know, you fancy going down to your supermarket and buying a clove of grocery garlic and planting them out individually? Why not? You know, you could give it a whirl, can't you? You know, these are in later than what would have been ideal, but no big deal. If I don't get massive garlic cloves, does it really matter as long as I get a little bit of something from them? Would I plant out onions now? Once again, maybe a little bit on the late side, maybe not. But if you've got some onion sets hanging over and you haven't planted them already, you know, plant them out. What are you going to do? Throw them away or plant them? I'd plant them. They've got 2 chances, haven't they? So Champion of England tall climbing pea, you can actually see they're really doing very well in here. Some of you, if you saw my last video I put up on spring plantings, you may remember when I planted these out. So I can't exactly remember my planting and planting out dates at present, but what I'll do before I upload this video, I'll put it on the screen here so you can see the planting dates for my peas. But peas, I germinate them inside and then I take them outside to the polytunnel, you know, maybe 3 weeks, a month or so after, when they're about that sort of size really, put them outside in the polytunnel just to bring them on a little bit more, and so they don't go leggy. You don't want peas to go leggy really, so that's why I bring them out. And I wouldn't germinate them in a polytunnel or a greenhouse, at least with no protection anyway, because rodents like to nip them, eat them, etc. So you don't want to do that. But yeah, peas, Champion of England, expecting some wonderful things from these. Would I plant peas now? Could be considered a little bit on the late side. But you know, there we go. Maybe you might want to go for something like a dwarf variety such as Meteor, which would probably come into cropping a little bit earlier. Peas generally don't like it too warm, over about 20-25 degrees C, 68-77 Fahrenheit. So you are risking that. But if you get a cool summer, who knows? But once again, if you fancy planting peas now and you haven't got any, give it a go. But my opinion is ideally you want to get them in a little bit early, really. But if you haven't got any and you want some, you've got nothing to lose, really, have you? Some other crops which we could talk about: aubergines. Would I set aubergines now? Could potentially be classed as a little bit on the late side. You've seen me grow aubergines before. You'll find a video on that in the description box below. If you haven't got any and you want to give it a go, give them a go. They like it nice and warm, 25 degrees C, about 77 degrees C, in order to germinate. So, you know, you can look into something like that. But what could often happen with them is you could germinate them and grow them, and they might only come into cropping when the frost comes. But once again, give it a go. We might get a late, you know, a very warm autumn. Who knows what's going to happen with regards to the weather. Chilies, same as the aubergines. Once again, you could give them a whirl. We've discussed melons as well. Now, if you are going to grow something like aubergines or chilies and plant them now, yes, it could be considered a little bit on the late side. Maybe, maybe not. Everyone's got their varying opinions on this. But one thing you can do is maybe when you plant them out into a smaller pot, and thus induce a little bit of stress to the plant. And then that way you can actually bring it to come into cropping earlier, because the plant, when under stress, it wants to propagate. So therefore it will maybe encouraged to make, you know, fruit and then seeds. So that's something you could look into doing if you wanted. Same with chilies as well. There are all these little things you can do. You know, you can give them something like an organic tomato feed, high potassium, etc., in order to give them some potassium for fruit formation, etc., and maybe stay a little bit away from something like a high nitrogen feed, which can contribute very much to leafy green growth, etc. But, you know, one thing I personally think about gardening is to remain flexible. And you've seen me grow things like potatoes, for example, and beetroot, where success is, you know, relatively likely to be achieved, whereas something like melons, aubergines, etc., okra, for example, you know, success of these heat-loving crops is less likely, in my opinion, in a climate such as the UK, as opposed to a warmer climate. So we will be making a polytunnel video soon. So I have actually got some aubergine seedlings that I planted in there. They're about that size now. We'll cover all this in a subsequent video. I've got some okra as well. You saw my melons, and I have actually made a few other sowings of some exotic or more exotic crops this year. So if they do well, we may cover those in a video as well. So here we are. Now you can see this little window, well, it's not really a windowsill propagator, but this unheated propagator here, you can see how it works. I use a lot of this sort of thing. So what have I actually planted in here? Hang on. So all of these went in on the 16th of April. Bitter melon, otherwise known as empalea, bitter gourd, medicinal value said to have. What have we got here? More giant pumpkin, 16th of April. What have we got here? Watermelon, variety sugar baby, excuse me. And watermelon here, sugar baby once again. And habanero peppers. So there we are, no germination yet, but they only went in, you know, 16th of April. So that's not really that long ago. So these are actually staying on an indoor windowsill. I could also put them out here in the polytunnel as well, but these, once with a little bit of sun, these really do heat up fast. So these unheated little propagators like this can be quite a nice asset to your, you know, gardening tools. There we are. So that's hopefully helped you. I've given you some planting dates, and they might help you where, you know, with regards to planting, etc. Next year you might want to have a little go at some of the things I've had a go at here. You know, you can plant many of the things now that I've spoken about. Hopefully I've made that very clear indeed. But yeah, hope you enjoyed that video. Comments, questions, whatevers, please feel free to post below. And if you'd like to help little old me out on my channel, please feel free to subscribe. Thanks for your time.